Hello and welcome to another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. I'm your host, Bob Azman, and it's great to have you joining us again today. And I know I say this about all of my guests, but I'm really excited about having this guest with us today as well, because he's been a CX professional for many years and has a tremendous amount of knowledge on clients and the industry and the market. And so I'm really pleased to have Greg Tucker joining us today. Greg, welcome to the podcast, and please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and be on the podcast. I lead Tucker and Company. We've been a CX consultancy for about 12 years since I left a CXO job way back when. We've seen a lot of change in CX. We do a lot of work with B2B and B2C companies, helping them develop their CX strategies, implement them, get some business benefits, which we'll talk about today.
Excellent. And Greg, I asked the same question of all of my guests because I find it so curious. And I always relate it to the fact that rarely does somebody say when they're, in growing up and or in high school, say, I want to be a CX professional when I grow up. So how does Greg Tucker get to be Greg Tucker today?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So I came out of Stanford Business School and went straight into the management consultancies that most people know as McKinsey or Bain. And at that time, we helped lead corporate strategy analysis. And then I kind of moved over into corporate process transformation. And so we'd work with the C-suites of some of the biggest companies around, General Electric and AT&T and IBM, and all these companies, PepsiCo, to actually help transform their companies. But it was mostly done from an inside-out process standpoint. And that was what was working at the time. But I always felt this need to say, look, we got to bring, how do we do that same thing from the outside in? And so I did it for years. I could never scratch that itch. And then finally, a couple of my consulting clients said, hey, would you shut up, and stop talking to us about this? Come over here and lead this stuff. So once I started doing that, I found my way into customer experience transformation. And at that time, it was new. We didn't know all the tools that we had. And then we started applying process transformation tools to customer experience. And wouldn't you know it, all the tools just worked just perfect, as long as we added some customer research and customer listening methodologies. And at the time, there's a lot of CX, the voice of the customer systems were just coming out with Satmetrics and some of the others. Mm-hmm. So once we applied those, it was on. And then I left those companies and went back to consulting when I moved to Dallas, Texas, for family reasons back in 2012. And we've been on quite a ride since then. But that's how I got here. It's like it was always a niche that needed to be scratched, and now now we got all the tools, and it's a full-flung practice.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic. We always like to hear about the journeys, and I don't think I've ever heard it characterize an itch that has to be scratched. So I love that. I love that analogy. I think a lot of us can share that kind of thought when it comes to CX, that it's always something that we need to address. So, Greg, you have a unique perspective because you work with a lot of clients, you do a lot of research, and we'll get into that, as you said. But what do you view as the state of CX right now, broadly speaking?
Yeah, Bob, I've been worried about CX for a while. And the reason is I have such high regard for the impact CX can have on a company, and the impact it can make on the both the results, the culture, the leadership, the customer impact, the market position, the competitive leadership that a company can have. And we see a handful of examples of that, but they're kind of driven out of the strong leader, founder-driven things. Southwest Airlines is always one of those, those examples that kind of pop up. But I have such high regard for it that I worry that we're not putting the right level of discipline, rigor, C-suite. It's not getting the proper C-suite attention that it deserves. It's not that we want to have that. It deserves that type of attention. And so we saw that in process transformation at the highest levels back in the 90s. We saw that people were investing billions of dollars in transforming their business from the inside out, but we're not seeing people make those same investments from the outside in. And CX deserves that. It is like I believe it to be the single most powerful, productive corporate strategy tool that anyone can have, more than mergers and acquisitions, which a lot of companies have, more than just product innovation. So I believe it to be that case, but the industry has a lot of individual practitioners, a lot of different schools of thought, and there's a lot of argument inside the community about what CX is. Okay, and we got to stop talking about that and talk about what it can, what it can impact. If we're worried about a definition, then for God's sakes, the C-suite is not going to take us seriously. I've interviewed a number of CEOs, and they kind of chuckle about, hey, look, the reason I don't spend any time on CX is I got more important things to worry about. And when I tell them, like, so you got more important things to worry about than doubling your revenues, and he goes, well, no, and I go, well, then that's what CX can do for you. And he goes, no one talks to me about that stuff. They just talk about the more soft, a lot of softer issues and cultural, we just need to be customer advocates and things like that. So, I worry about that. Now, all the elements are in place to do all that. We just, as a community, I think we just need to take it to the next level. And I worry that if we don't do it fast enough, then we'll be left behind as the AI revolution becomes a new shiny thing. That's my worry.
Yeah. Oh, I think AI is rapidly becoming the new shiny object.
Yeah.
Really interesting comments there, especially about the C-suite and your comment about the definition of CX. Greg, why are we still talking about that? Because somebody always thinks they've got the next big thing, and so they introduce another definition, or the number of X's, I call it, patient experience, customer experience, employee experience. I keep seeing more and more X's come out, and yet we're still struggling with the basic definition. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think that it's a relatively new field, let's put it that way. So it's really been around for, let's say, one decade, maybe 1.5. Okay. So there's books called The Experience Economy. Okay. It's probably about a 20-year-old book. And the answer is that's a big deal, but experience is not taught in any school. Outside of Michigan State's new offering, there's no one at a C-suite level who got a degree in customer experience. Okay, they got a degree in finance, strategy, marketing, operations, technology. So there's a variety of different things like that. There's product management, technology-oriented things all over the place. But it's a relatively new field, and because it's cross-functional, and because it actually steps on the toes of a lot of everyone in sales, marketing, support, operations, it's just it needs. There's a lot of people who don't quite know what to do with it, and it also becomes an organizational threat to many. So a lot of the definitions that we're searching for are questions from the C-suite about, well, what do you mean by that? Because they don't understand it. Okay, and so we need to actually have that, but we shouldn't have an argument about what it is. Okay, is that the more arguments we have, then the less credibility we have. And so, the answer is, I don't know, I don't know that there's a definition of financial management, okay, or marketing management that everyone say that's what it is. But everyone just kind of says, hey, we need marketing, we need sales, okay, like we need customer experience, leadership. And so, so I don't know how important the definition is, but we should stop talking about it and talk about delivering results. Is kind of my take on it.
And Greg, and we are going to get to your research, but this is a fascinating conversation we're having. Where do you think CX belongs in an organization? That's another topic we hear a lot about. Where does it fit? Marketing, operations, customer service, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's always a chuckle because marketing deals with prospects more than customers for the most part in most companies. The sales folks deal with the customers at the most. Success, success or support has a lot of interaction, and operations kind of cuts across a lot of internal functions, but it's customer facing as well. So a lot of organizations put it in marketing when that's the least, customer facing organization. And they're more worried about acquisition than they are retention or operations or support or any of the customer experience things that drive customers nuts and have them leave. So the question is, why do they put it there? I think it's because it's more understood by the CMOs. Okay. The voice of the customer tools are more understood by them as opposed to others. And the last part would be it doesn't have a home. That's a front end, it's the outside facing leadership team person, and so they give it to them to go figure out. Okay, but I think the dilemma there is I believe it to be the CXO should actually have its own role inside. So and the reason is, I believe that one of the best roles of the CXO is to actually be the architect, okay, what the customer experience is, could be, should be, and kind of a managing architect role to say, we're going to transform our customer experience from A to B, just as if they were the general contractor, moving from the blueprints of the old organization to the new, to the new blueprints. And that's a visionary, but it's also a practical role as well. So architects, everyone thinks, well, they just design things. Architects have a very technical role. If you've ever worked inside of a commercial building, you know that the architects understand virtually every technical detail that's going on. Now, from both a design and implementation standpoint, so I believe that it should deserve its own spot. But it threatens a lot of different C-suite leaders as well.
Mm-hmm. What's the most significant shift you've seen over the decade and a half that you've been involved, Greg, in CX?
Yeah, I think that I think what's really made a lot of progress has been CX technologies for the most part. We started out with a few VOC systems that could go out and collect information, and now the set of technical capabilities has just grown to a great level. So you can grab information from a variety of different touch points, integrate it together, get the kind of to pull something qualitative, quantitative. You can understand it by touch point. You can understand it by different customers. So I think there's a lot of improvement on that side. And I think that that's one of the easier things for companies to see themselves invested, which is we invested in the technology, we've got it in place. That helps us collect the information, measure it, monitor it. I think that's it's something that it's got a nice boundary on it, which is we have a system. I can see the budget, and we can put it in place. They're used to seeing that with CRM, with ERPs, with different the whole CRM ecosystem that Salesforce has put out there. So I think they're used to seeing that. So I think the technologies continue to improve. You can see it with the leaders like Qualtrics or Medallia or some of the different companies, like and with the advent of AI, okay, the integration of AI into those systems is actually just I think can take that technical side to the next level.
Mm-hmm. And that's a tip of the iceberg scenario, certainly, isn't it, right now with AI? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what I remember seeing though is that we always felt transformation had three different foundational ideas: people, the process, and technology. And I think that in CX's world, the technology has continued to evolve at a pretty rapid pace. And the improvements that I've seen are demonstrably better than they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So I think where we've got to worry, we've got to improve is on the people and process side.
Mm-hmm.
So the people, the people side, need to have, it's a very CX people leadership is a very multidimensional aspect. You've got to be one part technologist, one part culturalist. You've got to be a change leader. You've actually got to understand the process, the customer experience design process. So there's a lot of different areas. Having somebody with all those different skills is a challenge. Managing that is also a challenge as well.
Definitely. Excellent perspective, Greg. I appreciate that. Speaking listeners to Greg Tucker. And so, Greg, let's get into what are you working on these days? What's keeping your eyes on the ball, so to speak?
Well, for more than a decade since I've been focused on delivering the ROI of customer experience, and it goes all the way back to when I was a CXO. We did a lot of work, increasing the growth rate of one of the companies I was with to the point where they're hugely more successful than they were back then, and their competitor was back then. So it's off the charts. They were about a 50-50 competitor with one company in a kind of duopoly company back then. They made a pivot, and now they're probably 5x, 6x their market cap as a result of some of the changes they made. And so I've kind of been on that push, that's where I came from management consulting. It's what I was required to do for an entrepreneurial owner. And then we submitted that as a case study to CXPA back in 2012, and we won the CXPA Innovation Award for the $100 million customer experience, and way back when. And so we've been on that path since more than 10 years ago. But every year we do a number of different transformational projects. We get a lot of results, and we've been kind of keeping track of all of the impacts that those have had over the years. And finally, to this year, we said, look, let's take a breather. Let's put all that together and set of benchmarks. So how much should your revenue go up as a result of CX? How much could your costs go down as a result of CX transformation? Where does the growth come from? Is it about new acquisition? Is it about cross-selling? Is it about retention? What are the different factors there? We've seen a lot of general data on that one in the past, or guidance, but we wanted to see it with real case studies where people have designed it, specific examples, real ROIs on these things, as opposed to what I call a formula or a general direction, or you should want to do it. So we pulled all that together, and we're putting that out in a set of research papers. The first research paper will be about what are all the different growth in operational and profit levers, and then it'll dive into each one of those. What's customer acquisition, cross-selling, retention, and then cost savings. So we'll do that. And the numbers are almost too good to believe, because when we present them to most people, they go, "That's a bunch of BS. I don't believe any of it." And then at the end, they go, "Well, now I believe it." So I've heard it all before. We even put that. It's like, this is a bunch of hogwash out there. Maybe that's what we should call it, the set of hogwash benchmarks. But it's like, I can't believe this could be it until people actually achieve it. And it's all driven by real customer research, customer journeys, customer insights, internal benchmarks. So there's a lot of rigor and analysis that goes into it. It's almost a little too good to be true for a lot of people.
Listeners, I want to emphasize something Greg said, and that was in 2012. He submitted a case study on ROI. And so in today's world, we see a lot of pontification about ROIs for CX. And I just want to emphasize that Greg has been working on this for over a decade. So it's not something new. We always think somebody comes up with, I'm going to write a paper on the ROI of CX, and everybody thinks it's brand new. And in reality, you have somebody like Greg, as an expert in this field, has been doing this for, so there's a ability that comes with that and all of he's seen. So whet our appetite a little bit, Greg. What are some of the benchmarks you're seeing or hearing? So we look forward to reading this when it's released.
Yeah. So Bob, it's we looked at 20, more than 20. I think we've got 25 different case studies, and we've been collecting them for a while. We just hadn't added them all up and done any analysis on it. We just put every successful case study on the shelf. And it's like, hey, the shelf's getting a little full over there. And so we thought, well, let's take a look at it. About half of them are B2B, about half of them are B2C. Okay. And so we looked at the data across those two. So the highlights are we project that companies on average should be able to double their revenues by transforming their CX. Okay,
Wow.
double their revenues. Now, this isn't a this isn't a maturity thing. This is a causation, not a correlation. Okay, and so we do it by looking at specific case studies. I think what's different about this is I still remember seeing the Temkin research from, gosh, way back when, 2012, 13, 14, 15, about, they'd have some benchmarks. It's like, in this industry, we think that people could see this type of improvement. And there was no data behind that other than the market research that said, hey, Bob, what do you think you should be able to do? I'll just pick a number and put my thumb up in the air. It's like, I think it could be this percentage. Okay. And that's it was helpful at the time, but that's more of a correlation, okay, or a guesstimate, as opposed to real specific. So we've actually looked at it for all these different companies. So an example would be, we found a B2B company that sells chemicals, okay? And those chemicals are used for beauty products or hand creams or different things like that. So they're formulated in different areas. But they were trying to cut their costs. They got a new private equity owner who wanted them to cut their costs. So they started sending their samples out slower to save a little costs on FedEx. What we learned in our customer research is that they were missing the market, because when they're sending out samples for Procter and Gamble to do a formulation for some of their hand products, the person that putting that formulation together, it takes the first sample they get, they mix it up. If it works, then they're good. They've got a clock ticking on them to get that brand out the door. They're not going to sit there and wait for 10 more samples to come in, do 20 formulations, do a rigorous analysis. If it works and it's done and it's a reputable brand, they're off to the races. And the guy who comes in third, that the sample that comes in third is still sitting on the shelf. It's never going to get tested. Maybe it gets tested later on. But they realized by cutting costs that they were actually missing out on the market. The estimate on the market is a 60% improvement in their current sales. So it wasn't trivial. And then at the same time, they needed a more cross-selling. So a number of their companies were using 10 plus of their products, but 75% of their accounts were using one or two products. And the customer research we did said that those folks just didn't even know what they had to offer. And they were very willing. They loved the products. They loved the companies. They just didn't know. So just an awareness building campaign on that identified about another 50% increase in current sales. And that's directly tappable through their sales organization. And when you talk to the sales group, they were being compensated on new account acquisition, not on cross-selling. And it's like, okay, so let's just change the metrics, change the compensation, change the focus. And, when you add it up, they can double their revenues, So this was presented to the CFO, who said, this is a bunch of BS. I don't believe a word you're saying. We showed him the research, and he flipped over from, no way are we doing this, to, I need to cancel 5 other projects so I can invest in this. Wow. And, and I thought, now that's the type of impact the customer experience research, journey mapping, analysis, value analysis can really have. And I thought, this is one of 25 situations like that. So we started putting these things together. And so our research that we're putting out through both some LinkedIn blogs, some customer think blogs, as well as on our web, background research on our website, is really focused on educating people on what the art of the possible is, and an approach to be able to do that for every company out there. Mm-hmm. So we don't want it to be, a reliance on the benchmarks. we really wanted to put something with an ROI. We didn't want the ROI message to go out as clickbait, which is you click here and you find nothing. Ours is chock full of numbers, and no matter what industry you're in, or B2B or B2C, it's all there.
I mean, Greg, is it safe to say that you must be one of the only organizations that has assembled 25 case studies? I mean, that's pretty significant.
Well, I'm sure that there are others who would say, no, 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 we've got those case studies. And my answer is, hey, look, put them out. You know, the CX community needs it. Okay. The C-suites that that our community is serving, they need that. What they need to see is, look, if I could double my revenues by customer experience transformation, why am I going through the costly and risky moves of mergers, acquisitions, all of those things to do this stuff? Why am I doing that when it just makes perfect common sense? So I call, CX is common sense, but it's not common practice at the C-suite level. So they need it. We need it as a community. So if somebody else has got more benchmarks, I say, hey, I'm putting out 25. If you've got it, if somebody else has got 20, let's put them out there. Okay. It's not a game. It's not a contest. Okay. Right. It's just like make the contribution, because I think everyone needs to hear it.
Yeah, very good point. Very good. So this has been a fascinating conversation, Greg, as I expected it would be. Before I ask my final question, though, tell us where listeners can find information about these case studies and the work that your team is doing.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So we're putting the case studies on our website, which is www.tucker-co.com. So it's for Tucker and Company. Just take a look at it there. We're putting them also out in a series of LinkedIn blogs, okay, and we're doing some webinars as well. So look for those. You'll see the benchmarks in a variety of different ways. So we've got some small infographic versions, we've got case study versions, whatever you like. What we really want to do is we want to put it out there with enough understanding that people look at it and say, look, that could be me. Okay. And then also that's the what, the so what, the now what is, how do I get there? Okay. And it's, the foundational piece of that is good old-fashioned customer research and journey mapping and analysis. There's no there's no substitute for it. If you've already got that, it's the money's right around the corner. So we wanted to be able to draw a treasure map for people on how to go do this as well. And so I think you'll find that. So we look for it on LinkedIn, look for it on our website, and as always, I'm happy to talk with anyone about this. I've been trying to talk to everyone. I feel like the crazy man standing on the corner for 12 years going, hey, we should really be talking about the ROI of CX. And everyone knows, following the shiny new map of how to do journey maps or the new technologies or things like that. But I've been steady on this one since way back when.
I've known Greg for a number of years, and I can affirm that is the truth. He has been crying out into the wilderness, hoping somebody will listen. So I love the fact too that it's a mix of B2B and B2C, because whichever side you're on, somebody always say, well, that's B2B, it doesn't apply to me, or that's B2C, it doesn't apply to me. And that mix is really fantastic.
Yeah. And Bob, the benchmark, the results people can get are no different in B2C than B2B. If anything, B2B might be a little higher than B2C, but they both have the opportunity to save money. CX doesn't cost more; it costs less. Okay, it drives growth, dramatically higher. So why wouldn't this be the number one solution that the C-suite reaches for? And to me, that's been the puzzling fact all this time. It's like, why not? And the answer is there's a lot of reasons why. Okay, but focusing on the reasons why it's not selected is helpful, is interesting, but it's not that helpful. The answer is we just got to go out and do the right stuff. It's not hard; it just needs to be done.
Point well taken. Excellent, Greg. Greg, final words of wisdom for our listeners.
No, I just think, like I'm having the time of my life. I finally got to scratch the itch That was sitting out there a long time ago when customer loyalty and Fred Reichheld was putting out his early books, and NPS hadn't been invented. So I want to enable the CX community to do the best job possible, because I think that corporate America and the world and customers need it. So anything I can do to help, I'm willing to do.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Listeners, Greg Tucker, one of the experts in the field of CX, been doing it for years, and really one of the top CX professionals. So we are excited about this research and deep diving into hearing a lot more about it. Greg, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Always a pleasure.
And listeners, this has been another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. Please join me again for a future episode. And as always, please share this podcast with your network, and best of luck to the CX professionals listening. Thank you.